Hey, real quick, everybody, want to give a shout to our friends over at betonline.ag. I know the NFL's over, the Super Bowl's done. We got Major League Baseball, NHL, March Madness coming around the corner, which to me is the greatest postseason sporting event of all time and what I like to wager on the most. So head over to betonline.ag as soon as you can. Tell them Jboy sent you, whether it's prop bets, whether it's parlays, whether you want to go straight up, or whether you're into teasers, pleasers, whatever you like to do. They have it over there, and the online casino is open 24 hours a day. There's always something going down at betonline.ag. So check our friends out over there and tell them Jboy sent you.
You are listening to the Jboy Show, your number one source for Auburn and the SEC.
My goal was to run through his soul and grab his heart when I run through his soul.
Kurt, Nate, Coach Staff, those are memories.
I think we've established ourselves as, I think, the premier conference in college football.
Now, the SEC is better at the top. It's better in the middle.
The Southeastern Conference remains the premier conference.
Now takes the snap. Looking for the receiver. He's got Lutz Kirk. Touchdown, Auburn!
Think about it. It's always been the SEC and everybody else trying to catch it.
I think this is probably the best league from a competitive venue standpoint.
They have the most capable teams. You just look at those programs, the way they recruit, how they invest.
Snap to Burrow. 3 steps. Fires. Back corner of the end zone. Over the shoulder catch. Did he hold on? He did. Justin Jefferson. Touchdown, Tiger.
And now, your host, Jboy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Jboy Show. Really excited to bring on a guest that we've had on many times in the audio version. Very excited to get the audio and the video. A guy that's worked for 247 Sports, Rivals.com, Justin Hokanson, one of our audience favorites, going to talk some college hoops, college football. Justin, appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, man. As always, glad to be here.
Yeah, got a little bit different now, a little bit different setup. So, trying to move up in the world. But where I want to start, Justin, obviously we had college hoops this past weekend. We'll start with Auburn and Kentucky. And, if you're going to get Kentucky at Rupp, this was the year to do it. Auburn started out well, had a 6-point lead at halftime, did have a lot of turnovers in the first half. Kentucky went on a huge run in the second half to take a big lead. Auburn storms back, blows the coverage on defense, basically gives up a 3-pointer and ends up losing the game. Just your overall thoughts on that game, just the transition of it and really how it ended.
Yeah, I mean, it was disappointing. I agreed with what BP said after the game. It was just a disappointing loss. You're winning in the first half, you're leading at halftime, and you come out that first 10 minutes of the second half and just look lost. I mean, it looked like they'd never faced the zone, and Kentucky was mixing it up a little bit. And that lost them the game. I mean, Kentucky, it was like a 20-point swing probably, and that lost them the game. And then they came back towards the end and played with their hair on fire and played more the style he wants them to play like. And they come back and tie the game up, only to then give up a wide open 3 with 30 seconds left. That was brutal. That was brutal. But, it was really indicative of this team. I said it after the game on Twitter. I said, look, it's just the same story, different game. I mean, it was a game where they're good enough to win. They very well could have won. You could say they should have won potentially. But they're right there, and they just didn't make enough winning plays, and that comes with maturity and experience. I mean, we've talked about it before now with Georgia, Ole Miss in this game. There's different reasons that they could have or should have won all of them, but they just don't have the experience. I think Pearl said after the game, they played with their hair on fire at the end. He goes, but they just don't understand yet to consistently do that.
Yeah,
and so it's just one of those games. It's frustrating to lose. You should have gone up to Rupp and made a little bit of history and broke that streak. And it didn't happen. And so I just keep looking at this team like, you're not going to the NCAA tournament. You've got next year. You're young, but you want to see them get over the hump. See, I'm starting to now look at this team going, we can make excuses, like we can do that, but they've played enough games where I'm the benefit of the doubt. I'm losing that a little bit, and they need to get over the hump and win that game. They need to not falter against Ole Miss with a 12-point lead. They need to mean, you got some big games down the stretch: Tennessee, LSU, Florida, Alabama. The end of their schedule is brutal. Yeah. They need to get over the hump and win one of those. To me,
I agree, and you bring up a great point. When it comes winning time, you're always going to play hard, but being able to consistently play with that edge. And you're right. I mean, we're 22 games in right now. You've played enough games. You've played enough league games to understand not only the effort level, but the mental effort level, the ability because it wasn't just the last 3 that they gave up. I mean, BJ Boston was wide open. Looked like he was playing horse. And when you have guys that are sophomores, and again, I'm not going to call anybody out individually, but you got to know the defense by now, and regardless of what's called, there are guys, when I watch Auburn defensively, they're just not in the right spot. And offenses are really starting, to me, when I watch, are starting to figure that out during the game, because you're going to see it on tape, but they're watching Auburn overplay on defense. They're watching guys not be in the right spot. There's no communication. You see 2 guys guarding one person a lot of times in the game. And regardless of how bad Kentucky is this year, those guys are good players. They're going to make open shots, just like Auburn's guys will make open shots. And JT Thor had an incredible game yesterday. You see the potential on that guy. I've said it. You've said it. I think he has the highest ceiling of anybody on that roster right now. But, that sophomore class has really got to step up. You look at guys, Alan Flanagan, who started out really hot, was moving up draft boards, now just has looked lost. I think averaging 5 turnovers a game with no assists over the past couple games. Devin Cambridge really hasn't progressed from last year from the 3-point line, and being able to be under control and not just running around out there and being out of control. Before we move on, and BP will tell you the same thing. He said, listen, youth isn't an excuse. But looking at this roster this year, you look at Jabari Smith coming in next year, Trey Alexander, there's some guys that if they don't figure it out are not going to have nearly as many minutes next year as they do this year. And at the end of the day, that's the way it works.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I think people are really waiting to see what happens. Does Shareef go? Mm-hmm. What does that do if he does go? I mean, as good as Auburn could be next year, it leaves a huge hole at point guard if he does go. So it's not like that he can go and Auburn will be just fine. They're going to have a big hole to fill if he does go. But yeah, I think you just want to see that jump in basketball IQ and just game awareness. And I think sometimes when you watch Pearl teams play, it actually takes for people that don't watch, Auburn fans understand, but when you play the style of play that Pearl plays, which is he wants them to play with their hair on fire. Everybody's got a green light. I say everybody, but Dylan Cardwell doesn't. But I mean, basically, if you're a decent shooter, shoot. He's not going to take away your confidence. But to play that way, there's times where you're watching it. If you're not careful, you'll lose games the way they are. It takes a basketball IQ, even to play a fast-paced, what looks like sometimes a pickup game. You still have to have a high basketball IQ and game awareness and experience and maturity to play that way, and then also play under control when it matters, slow it down when it matters, make a winning play when it matters. And so
there's
that's
a word
what the team
for it,
doesn't
Justin.
have.
Yeah,
That's what
Composure.
they don't have.
Composure.
They're playing fast, but they're not understanding when to make the play on defense or offense, and they're just costing themselves some games with foolish turnovers or a quick shot or whatever it might be. So that's the frustrating thing about this team. But you're right about Jabari and Trey Alexander coming in next year. Is you're going to have some guys that, if they don't kind of grow up a little bit, they're going to be the 6th or 7th guy. Instead of potentially starting. I mean, you look at Flanagan, potentially as a guy that could be cut next year. Devin or Jalen. I mean, any of those guys, they need to kind of make those moves. That's why I want to see some growth from this team towards the end of the year and get over the hump, beat LSU or beat Tennessee or beat Florida, win one of these games like you did against Missouri, show you can do it again. Now that teams have film on Shareef, show that you can overcome that and make those plays down the stretch. But yeah, it was disappointing, man. You had a chance to beat Kentucky on the road and tie it up, and you give up an open three. That sucked.
Yeah. Without a doubt, I really parallel it to, if you look at football, you make a big play on offense to tie the game, trying to send it to overtime. They got a couple plays left, and you blow a coverage. The corner just doesn't cover number one running the vert, and he's wide open for a touchdown. And again, look, I know it was matchup zone, whatever you want to call it, but there's not a defense that is built to leave somebody wide open for a three. That just does not exist. Whether you over leverage yourself, you overplayed yourself, you got to be in the right spot. You got to be smart enough to be in the right spot. And that's something Auburn has to grow. But I want to transition to Alabama, Hoke. Before we get to football here, you watch them play. And I want to make this point. Look at the two teams that are leading the league. What do they have in common? Experience. John Petty, experienced. Herb Jones, experienced. Quinterly, a transfer from Villanova, but experienced. Shackelford, experience. Alex Reese, these older teams in a year with lack of preparation, just like we talk about in football, experience always reigns king, but this year it's times 10. And I don't say that to take away anything from Alabama. They are absolutely on fire right now, the way they shot the ball in the first half. But I'm going to keep saying this. What separates Alabama this year is the way they play defensively, not only against sets, but in transition as well. And if they're able to do that, I'm going to get to the region. I know it's early and it can change that it looks like they may go in, which is an absolute death region. But if they're able to shoot the ball the way they were yesterday, they're going to defend with Nate Oates. They're going to hustle after loose balls. Is this a team that you see that could maybe upset a Gonzaga or beat a Iowa with Luka Garza when it comes down to tournament time?
Yeah, no doubt. Alabama's got enough pieces from a maturity level standpoint, from the ability to shoot the three, to defend, you've got guys that do different things well, which I always look for in a basketball team.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a guy do you have versatile players that kind of know their roles, right? So you don't have a bunch of guys that all think they do the same thing. Everybody knows that they do different things well. And that's Alabama. They're really, really good. Now they can, as you saw against Missouri, right? They're also capable in some other games. They can kind of not perform up to what they're capable of. And they can, Oklahoma's without their best player, they still lose that game. So Alabama's obviously not as good as Gonzaga and some of those teams in terms of just they're really, really, really good, but they are capable of it. And so, they're capable of playing a Baylor or a Gonzaga or somebody like that and beating them. Alabama's very much like, very much like what Auburn was a couple of years ago. They're very dangerous. They're very dangerous. They've got the maturity. They've got players that do everything. They can shoot the three. They hustle. And so, they're a dangerous team. They're a really dangerous team. I'm curious to see for them. It'll be about matchups. I think for a team like Alabama, you could probably go back and look and say there's teams that are going to match up really well. And then there's teams that maybe they might struggle against. If there's a team that's really disciplined in one way or another that maybe takes away the three or just forces them to slow it down some. That could be where, they struggle more. But man, you see against a team like Georgia that likes to get up and down, no chance. Alabama loves that. They're going to score. Score 115 points. So Alabama's really, really dangerous. And John Petty's probably the biggest part, man. He can go hot and cold. He's been great this year. I just know in the past, there's times where he vanishes and doesn't hit a three. I think he's kind of over that a little bit more this year, but he's maybe an X factor. If he's on, watch out for them. If he's not, I think it takes a lot away from that team. I think he's a big X factor in terms of being consistent.
I agree. And I think the difference in John Petty this year as opposed to last is if the three's not going in, he is still trying to ball on defense. Last year, if he wasn't shooting well, you'd watch his defense, it was kind of lackadaisical. But now they've all bought in. And I think that's a compliment to Nate Oates and the system that he's running, a guy that's name continues to get hotter. And don't forget, they got Bruner coming back as well, which to me, him and Shackelford are kind of catalysts, as crazy as that sounds, for Alabama's offense. Shackelford is a guy that I think is taking an even bigger step this year than he did last year. He was a dangerous three-point shooter. Now he's added that drive. But I do hope for a second, want to remind our audience that we have a ton of merchandise on the way, hoodies, hats, all types of stuff. I don't want to give it all away yet. You'll be able to find it in our store at thejboyshow.com and everywhere once it's released. So stay patient. I promise you it's coming. We want to make sure it's perfect, and we got enough for everybody, especially for the hoodies. I know everybody wants a hoodie, and we're going to try and get everybody a hoodie. So make sure you check us out, and we'll keep you updated on that. But Hoke, transitioning to football, and me and you have talked about the new hires, Brian Harsin, Josh Heupel, Shane Beamer, a ton. And when you look now at the point we're at, because a lot of people are asking, and I'll start with Brian Harsin, Auburn really hasn't dove into the portal as much as people thought early. But my question to you is, I think there's another factor in this, and it's kind of twofold. We know we have college football this spring from lower division levels. Do you think that Auburn, especially on the offensive line, I know South Carolina's got, I think, 7 from the portal already, and really any team in general with a new coach. But do you think some of these teams are going to watch these games and say, hey, Delaware?
Yeah, it could be interesting. It could be a whole nother element added to this college football season. Auburn's certainly a program that's going to need to look for some offensive linemen and try to figure some things out. But that'll be interesting to watch. I think you're onto something.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. To be honest with you, I think they may never move the smaller divisions back to the fall, because they tried the XFL in the spring, the AFL, everything in the spring. But people will watch college, and I think it may be a big moneymaker and be able to get more revenue from TV ratings, just for people wanting to have stuff to watch. And if you think about it, people already will really be excited because spring practice is on the way. Now you marry that with some games on Saturday during the spring. You're tailgating during the spring, something we're really not used to unless it's baseball or something like that. So I think the dynamic may be very interesting. And I was one of the first people to be like, listen, if you're going to put it in the spring, I don't know how you're going to get it back to the fall. But the more I think about it, I think this may be a calculated move to keep it in the spring. But all in all, looking at signing day, and again, the second signing day is not the national signing day. It's almost like last call. You're waiting on kids for grades. There may be a few 4-star, 5-star guys that know they have a spot that are holding out. But to me, it's mainly a grades thing and seeing if a guy's going to make that test score or if he's going to make that GPA. But when you look at what Brian Harsin's done so far, getting Colby Smith, we talked about it, hadn't signed an offensive tackle since 2017. When you're looking around right now, how do you feel about how he's kind of started in this?
He's doing a good job. That's an amazing stat, that just hearing it out loud again. I saw when it was put out there when it happened, but my gosh, I mean, if you want to talk about one of the reasons that, we go back to people that on the outside maybe wondered why did they get rid of Gus Malzahn?
Yeah.
He never had a losing season, and all that's true. But man, offensive line recruiting is probably one of the biggest indictments on his tenure, is the fact that trailed off so badly, and it showed in their performance on the field. They didn't have an offensive line that was very good, up to the standard of winning the division very often. And the fact that you have a tackle that wasn't signed since 2017 is actually amazing. I feel like you have to try to do that. It's like, I feel like you could accidentally do it. You wouldn't even try, and you would accidentally, did we sign a couple of tackles? It was an accident, but we did it. The fact that you just did it is almost like a purposeful, like, no, we're going to try not to, because it's that ridiculous. But he's doing a good job overall. Brian Harsin's doing a good job overall. We won't know anything. Let's see the spring. I'm curious to see what you see inside in terms of tempo and how physical it is, maybe. And obviously you want to see development of Bo Nix, and that's a huge part, right, of Brian Harsin getting off the ground as Auburn. Is, first of all, can he fix Bo Nix? If he can get off to a really good start at Auburn. If he can't, it might be a bumpy first couple of years. But I think he's doing a good job. I see a lot of culture stuff with him and his staff that I think they're on the same page. So that's good. I mean, even on down to support staff, I just see comments and things, whether it's public or social media or whatever, that certainly things seem to be everybody on the same page in terms of messaging. Obviously, you got to go out there and translate that to the team, get the team around the same kind of messaging. But if he seems like he's doing a good job with the team, and if they can pick up on the messaging and he can kind of keep that message going with the team, I think I like it. So there's things I like about him, but now you got to see how he's going to coach and how he's going to develop.
Yeah. And I want to ask you too, I want to shift to Tennessee, because there's obviously been a lot made, kind of the way, some of the recruiting stuff was handled. And again, unless you're there and you know exactly what happened, I don't want to dive too deep into it, but just from an optics standpoint, with the Rock Taylor situation, it's just a tough deal. To me, I look at this Josh Heupel hire, I think it's a stopgap, and that's not any offense or insult to Josh Heupel. But, he was kind of on thin ice at UCF, especially next year if they didn't perform very well, because they've kind of started to drop and level off after what Scott Frost had done. And you look at a guy like Billy Napier or a guy like Jamie Chadwell, somebody that's built a lot of equity at a smaller place, that has leverage, has a team coming back that they know is going to be very good. They're not going to take that Tennessee job when you have NCAA investigations looming. You don't know if you're going to have scholarship reductions, because it's an absolute fist fight in the SEC, regardless if you're in the West or you're in the East. You look right now, Georgia is going to be absolutely loaded next year, and they have a quarterback coming back that if he can stay healthy, I think can really evolve that offense and put it back to kind of where they were a couple years ago. But just when you look at that hire of Heupel, do you believe that same thing? Do you think we're trying to get to where we find out, all right, this is what we have, a year probation, lose this amount of scholarships. And when we get back to zero here in 2 or 3 years, if he hasn't just miraculously done an incredible job, we're going to try and go get one of those guys that we would have tried to parlay earlier if we were at zero neutral with no clouds hanging over the program per se.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. It makes me think about, Ole Miss hanging on to Matt Luke, or even going back in the day when Alabama hired Mike Shula. It's Heupel's a better coach than those guys. I mean, I think Heupel's a good coach. Okay, so Josh Heupel's a good football coach. He carried on what Frost had going on in Central Florida, and they were pretty good. I mean, trailed off a little bit, but they were good, and he's a good coach. But there's no question that this is a stopgap. You bring Danny White over from Central Florida. They go after some guys. They realize real quickly, we're not going to be able to get the kind of coach that Tennessee football probably thinks they should be able to go get. That's not going to happen, especially in the current environment with what they got going on. I think they realized really quickly that wasn't going to happen. And I think it made sense right now for them to go, look, let me just bring Josh Heupel. He's a good coach. I know we've worked together, so we can come over and kind of fix things together. We're going to be on the same page. So there's some elements of it that I think make sense right now for Tennessee to get through this, crap that they're in, to bring in a coach that the AD and the coach come basically as a package deal. They've worked together, and to kind of get through this NCAA stuff. And Heupel's not a bad coach. He could surprise you, and he could go out there and win 8 or 9 games. But I worry that Tennessee, this is going to be a long road, because what I think is going to happen, unless Heupel shocks us all, I think they just hired a stopgap, and they're going to have a decision to make in about 3 or 4 years. And they're going to go, okay, we kind of knew he wasn't the guy, and so he kind of got us through it, and he's never going to win 11 games. He's never going to win the division, but he's not bad. And I think they're going to face a decision in a few years of, what do we do now? Like, okay, we got through the mess, but I don't know that they could do it any differently. They can't go get the kind of coach they want now. So I think that their fans need to kind of take a step back and hope for the best with Heupel and say, okay, look, over the next 4 years, here's what we need to do. Not get in any more trouble, win 8 games a year, right the ship, just get a little stability, and then decide then just see where you're at. And then maybe make a decision on Heupel, and maybe you fire him. And I think after about 3 years, if you're Tennessee, you need to stabilize everything. And then after about 3 years, you need to start looking for the next opportunity. The next guy that comes along that you want, you need to just pull the trigger. And if that means firing Heupel after 3 or 4 years, so be it. But it's just going to be a weird situation. But I think they could be caught in kind of okay, what do we do now? He's not bad, but he's not the guy.
A little limbo, a little bit.
Yeah, which is always dangerous. Because then it's going to drag on longer than it should. So I think it's fine for now for them, but I think 3-4 years from now they could be in another kind of boat of what do we do?
Well, the way I describe it, maybe instead of stopgap, he's like the person you date before you meet the person you marry. That's what like Josh Heupel is to me for Tennessee. And I think you, me, everybody here, we've watched enough football to understand crazy stuff can happen. I'll be interested to see how Heupel, if he keeps going at warp speed with that offense, because I don't think over the course of time you can stop anybody, and it puts the defense and the defense coordinator in such a tough spot. And we're here with Justin Hokanson, former Rivals.com and 247 Sports SEC reporter, one of our favorite guests. And before I let you go, Justin, something that I think is a theme of the SEC from a football standpoint going into this next season is there's a lot of quarterbacks that are leaving this league. There's a lot of teams, high-profile teams, that are going to be breaking in a new quarterback, even if they got a little bit of experience. You look at Bryce Young in Alabama. You look at Florida, going to have to replace their quarterback. You go down the list. Auburn does return Bo Nix. But my question for you is Texas A&M to me, and everybody says, oh, well, Kellen Mond's gone. They're going to take a step back. I actually believe the opposite. I think they were a little bit hamstrung by Kellen Mond's really inability to make all the throws from a touch standpoint, some of his decision-making, even as an older guy, especially late in games. You think about the pick that Auburn dropped that could have, sealed the game, and that's happened a couple times to him. And it looks to me like Jimbo knew that they could run the ball so well and they were so effective that they were going to lean on that, run the play action, run the quick game, make it simple for Kellen, do your bubble screens. But do you think we're going to see a Texas A&M offense with some of the kids that they brought in at quarterback? There's some high-profile guys they've brought that have a lot of expectations, and we all know Jimbo's a quarterback. Do you think A&M's going to open this offense up a little bit? And if they do, with the way that defense is improving, to me, they almost become scarier, Hoke.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree with you. I think that, Kellen Mond's a guy that had a lot of athletic ability, and it took somebody like Jimbo Fisher to kind of rein some of that in and produce a pretty productive, consistent quarterback. But I wouldn't say that he's the perfect guy for Jimbo. I think you're right. I think Texas A&M right now, over the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years, is they're poised to do something that they haven't done. I think what Jimbo's done and the way they're recruiting and the money and the resources they have and the momentum off of a big year in a bowl game, I think the time is now for Texas A&M. Now, the problem for them is they're in the division with obviously Alabama, and the time for Alabama has been the last decade. So it's tough, but I do think A&M is probably in as good a position they've been in, I don't know, maybe my life in terms of doing really big things over like the course of like a 5-year period, like maybe winning the division, maybe competing for it another year, maybe getting in the playoff. I mean, I think all that stuff is on the table for them over the next couple of years. They obviously have to replace Mon, so there's a little bit there, but I think over the next couple of years, it's kind of strike while the iron's hot. I think the potential is there over the next couple of years. There's a window for them. As good as Alabama is, Auburn showed they can do it, right? So it can happen, but there's a window for A&M right now. I think they're probably, of any team in the league, they're the one you're watching. Like, could they be the next program to take a step? They've already surpassed Auburn in the division for the time being. You look at what Mullen did at Florida, kind of getting them back in the national picture, and now A&M. So I think you're exactly right. I think they're the program right now that's like, they've got a window to do some things that they haven't done, and we'll see if they can take advantage over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and they got a chip on their shoulder too. They thought they should have been in the playoff. Yep. You got a lot of guys coming back, especially up front. A&M's going to be pretty dangerous. But Hoke, I got one quick question for you. I try to never put you on the spot. If you don't have an answer for me, you don't have to. But right now, Monday, today, do you think Shareef Cooper comes back next year for Auburn?
Man.
Take your time.
If the draft predictions are correct, 8 and 5, and I'm like, whoa, and they were right. I mean, so if those are right, and you're talking about Shareef Cooper, which, look, I love Shareef Cooper. I'm shocked that people would take him 10. I think the potential with him, is just so good. You're going, okay, the guy's got kind of generational vision, and we'll teach him how to shoot and play a little faster. But if he's going top 10, he won't turn that. You can't turn that down. His dad is smart enough that they're smart enough. His sisters in the league, they're not going to turn down top 10. But if it's outside the top 10, I personally think that you probably have a debate. If he's projected, let's say, if he goes in and talks to teams and they're like, hey, we think you're going to be 15. I think that there's a chance that Auburn could say, look, here's what we got coming back. We could win a national championship. Your numbers are going to go up next year. Jabari and all these guys, you're going to be phenomenal. There's a chance. But, man, if it's top 10 and they think that's where he's going to go, there's about no way you can turn that down. I just wouldn't see it. And then they're fine. They don't need the money. Like, his dad does well. But that would be a lot to turn down. And he could come back next year and be phenomenal. But you add Jabari and Trey Alexander, is Shareef going to average 21 a game? No, he's not. His assists will go up, but he's not going to average 21 a game. So I don't know, man. I think if he's top 10, I can't imagine him coming back. I think if it's outside of the top 10, then I think there's probably going to be a legitimate debate that'll happen internally between his dad, Shareef, all BP and trying to figure it out. So I think it's too early to tell, but there's a chance, probably a small chance right now.
Yeah, and when I say I don't see it, I'm not saying I don't see Shareef Cooper being a top 10 pick NBA player. It's just this year, I think he's got to get a little bit bigger. I think he's got to get a little bit stronger. He's got to speed up his shot when you're that size. You can't just hit the step back every time. And there's some areas, it just shows you he has all, this height, which is well-deserved, but his ceiling is so much bigger. And I think maybe that's the thing, like you brought up, that these NBA scouts are saying, hey, we want to get him in here, get him in our program, get him in our strength and conditioning program, get him surrounded by pros that'll catch the ball when you make a great pass to him, which is something that Auburn continues to struggle with, especially down low. But Hoke, tell everybody before I let you go where they can find you on social media. You're a fantastic follow, always putting out content. I love when you stop by, and our audience does as well.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Love being here. Yeah. At J Hokanson or at _ J Hokanson, and just chat it up, man. We talk a lot of Auburn, obviously, because that's my background, but I love seeing what's going on with SEC football and basketball. We talk about it all. So glad to be here, man. Good luck and proud of you for everything you're doing.
Oh, well, man, I appreciate that. Coming from you, that means a lot. But we'll continue to scope the SEC. We try and diversify the portfolio, obviously, and we're going to keep expanding past that. But I do want to let everybody know, thank you for joining us again for another edition of the Jboy Show. Justin Hokanson, fantastic as usual. Like I said earlier in the show, make sure you get ready for the merchandise that's going to drop. You head over to thejboyshow.com, get prepared for that. Hit that donate button if you want. It's been another edition of the Jboy Show, and Jboy's going, gone. The Jboy Show is produced by David Cohn, technical director Dave Hammock, creative director David Culbertson, audio engineer Feyzan, production assistant Kyle Orr, and our executive producers Crain, Vince Thompson, and of course we film at Melt Sports in Atlanta, GA. So come check us out.